Probably should back up and introduce myself. Those who don't know me, my name is Anthony Cobb. I am the Chief of Police with the City of Champaign. Also present from the Champaign Police Department, we have Deputy Chief Joe Gallo here. He's with the Operations Division, oversee our patrol section. And then we have Deputy Chief Troy Daniels here with us, black suit standing back here. He oversees our Operations Support Division, which are detectives, front desk, things of that nature. And then we have Laisha Metters. Laisha is in charge of community services, or community engagement, our outreach component, as well as communication. So, but like I said, it's been 10 years since we had this dialogue, and the reason why we went into it, and I'm gonna apologize up front, we got a choice to make here, and I'm gonna let you guys help me make this choice. The dimmer switch is broken, and so we can turn the lights all the way off so everybody can see it in complete stereo, or we can leave it like this. I can tell you this is the last presentation. We're going to put all this PowerPoint and everything on the website so you can be able to access it. So if you want to just listen to me and I'll talk you through all that stuff, we can leave the lights on or I can turn it off. You guys tell me what you would prefer. On? You want to see me? Because I know you turn them off, you won't be able to see me, I'll be honest. I do disappear. So yeah. So all right, so with that said, the reason why we're going through this process is we're looking at the future of Champaign Police Department going into the 21st century. Part of the reason why we want to be engaged with our community is to have some clear, diligent about our purpose. We want to be thoughtful and transparent with our organizational goals. We want to be open to feedback and dialogue from all citizens. Your opinion matters to us. We want to be able to serve citizens. In order to do so, we need to talk and hear from our citizens. We want to be innovative. We want to be open to change. But with that said, we need to be aware of our past, present, and future. And then we want to be greatly engaged with our community. When we talk about what we're going to look at today, today's agenda, we're going to do the overview of the strategic plan. How did it come about? We took a bottom-up approach, but we're going to talk about that approach. We're going to review the initiatives, and then we're going to open the floor up for community dialogue, community discussion to talk about your thoughts, to get your input, and then we'll talk last about next steps. A couple items to note for you. One, this meeting has been audio, video recorded. Got the media in the back here, but we also have a couple other cameras here, so making you aware you've been recorded, so I want everyone to know that up front. We're going to ask everyone just to hold your questions to the end. So if you got questions, just jot it down on a piece of paper. I promise you, we will answer every question as best we possibly can this evening. If it gets too late and they put us out of the building because we reached our time, I will stand outside and talk with anyone who have seen my car and we'll go through the question. But we'll make sure we get everyone's question answered. And since we're small in numbers, we're not going to worry about the time limit. We want to be respectful, but at the same token, we want to make sure we get everyone's question answered. A couple other things to keep in mind is, if you are a user of social media, if you happen to be doing Twitter, please use the hashtags listed there. One is hashtag CPDCM, which is Champaign Police Department Community Meeting, or CPD STIR, which is Champaign Police Department Service to Trust, Integrity, and Respect, or hashtag Unconditional Respect. There's also Facebook as well as YouTube. Now that we got our commercial announcements out the way, let's get into the strategic plan itself. Before we can start with this, let's talk about overview of Champaign Police Department. We consist of 4 districts within the city of Champaign for the police department. Right now, we are standing in the Northwest District. The way we divide the city starts at, let's take Prospect Avenue. It runs north-south throughout our city. Everything that is west of Prospect and north of University Avenue is part of this district, which is the Northwest District. Everything that is south of University Avenue and west of Prospect is our Southwest District. Everything that is east of Prospect but north of University is our North District, and everything that is south of University and east of Prospect is our South District. 4 districts. In those districts, we have allocation of resources as far as the number of police officers. We use intelligence-led policing, and we push those officers into those districts based on the calls of service that they're broken down. We have 4 shifts with 3 patrol lieutenants. The shifts that we run within our patrol division starts at 7 o'clock in the morning with our first shift that is overseen by Lieutenant Todd Myers, and they work from 7 a.m. to 5 p.m., 10-hour shift. We have a power shift that comes in at noon, 12 o'clock noon, and they work to 10 p.m. Lieutenant Myers oversee that. Power shift is a smaller group of officers, about 9 officers on that shift and 1 sergeant. And then we have our evening shift, which starts at 5 p.m. and it goes to 3 a.m. and that's overseen by Lieutenant Bob Ray. And then our night shift, which starts at 10 p.m. and it goes to 8 o'clock a.m. and that's overseen by Lieutenant Jim Clark. As you can see, we have overlapping shifts at different points throughout the course of the day. So that's how we staff the street. So that's the overview of the police department and how we interact. The strategic plan, when we started working on it, we began this process in June of 2013. The way we started the process is through a bottom-up approach, and we sat down with a third-party consultant that we hired to come in and work with us. This consultant talked with the command staff about what is it that we want to accomplish, and we said, hey, we want to hear back from our public as well as our employees on how we're going to govern ourselves or how we're going to police our community into the future. And so we started through small group discussions by going out to all the different briefings, the shifts that I just described for you, and we started small group dialogue. We went to an investigation, we talked about our civilian employees, but once we got all this feedback from them, we put together a survey, and from that survey, we sent it out to all employees and required them to give us some feedback. Once we get that feedback and that raw data, we put together a core committee, and that core committee consisted of, next slide, internal stakeholders, which are city council members. We had Champaign police staff on there. We had officer spouses on there, as well as retirees, as well as our employees. External stakeholders, community members. We had other city departments represented there, but we actually had community members as well as community coalition members as part of this external group. And they helped us to go through the raw data. As we went through this raw data, about 20 individuals part of this core committee. They helped us put together how we're going to go into engagement. And we took a hard look at employee action. We looked at employees, we looked at communication, technology needs, proactive policing, training, community engagement, staff resources, internal and external trust. And we talked hard about how we're going to take our outreach to engagement. What is that? Outreach is, the way we define it is when we show up and there's an event going on in the community and we unpack our bag and we sit down and we do our presentation and the event is over with, we pack our bag up and we go back to the police station. Engagement is when we show up at that event, we unpack our bag and then we throw the bag away. We're not looking to run back to the station. We want to stay in contact with the individuals that we're serving for the duration. We want our employees to become engaged and be engaged from the beginning of their career to the end of their career. How do we make that happen? And those are things we want to talk about. We know in order to do that, we got to deal with the internal and external trust factor. And after looking at all that data, that pushed us to our current mission statement. The mission of the Champaign Police Department is to serve our public by unwavering protection of all citizens through unconditional respect and collaborative efforts with our community. That's what we want to be about. But how are we going to get there? How are we going to accomplish that? That leads us to our guiding principles. And when you look at our guiding principle, you see service, trust, integrity, respect. Service is defined as providing the highest quality of service while considering the changing needs of our community. Trust, building trust by working in partnership with the community and working collaboratively within the department. Integrity, performing our roles with the highest level of integrity and respect. Consistently treating everyone we encounter with unconditional respect. Take the first letter from each of those words. That's where we get our acronym STIR. We want our employees to become catalysts, a positive catalyst within our community to stir, to create change, a positive change within our organization. One thing we're proud of at the Champaign Police Department is that we believe we have an organization of leaders. And what we mean by leaders is that when people call 911 and they want the employees to show up, the officers to show up, they're looking for quality service from them. One thing we're hearing in stereo from our citizens, and I hope you all would agree, is you want to know who are the men and women that are serving you. What are they doing, how they're going to respond, how they're going to deal with issues, and you want them to be that professional leader when they're needed. But at the same token, we want our officers not to only provide the unwavering protection, but we also want them to collaborate. And we want to collaborate through that unconditional respect, recognizing we respect and recognize all citizens in all walks of life. With that said, that takes us to all the initiatives that we came together. So when we took all this raw data and we came up with our mission and we came up with our guiding principle, there was a lot of things that we needed to do and incorporate how we're going to accomplish and get there. And we broke those things up into 4 building blocks. And this is the area we're going to cover. The 4 major building blocks and initiatives for this strategic plan, as we saw them, as we put them together, centers around community safety and connection, trust and trust building, employee wellness, training and development, best practices, policy, and oversight. But we believe if we can deal with these 4 initiatives, these 4 building blocks, that's going to lead us into the 21st century of policing. With that said, I'll turn it over to Deputy Chief Gallo, who's going to cover our first one, which is community safety and connection.
Can you hear me back there?
No.
No? That's better. All right, I'm kind of a soft talker, so I'm going to need to use the microphone. I promise I won't break into a song. So our first initiative, community safety and connection, we'll talk about initiative 1A, which is providing appropriate resources to our community. And when we talk about providing appropriate resources, we're talking about both internal resources and external. Internally, we're talking about making sure we have proper staffing and officers to respond to the needs of our community. But what we're going to talk about is the external resources. And we want to make sure that we're providing support to all the partners in our community. And the 2 that I want to talk about tonight is the Community Coalition. Community Coalition is where we partner with a lot of the other organizations in the community, whether it's the Champaign Park District, for schools, Access Initiative. There's a number of different organizations, and we have a common goal on trying to make our community safer for the children and for the adults that live and work in town. So we want to make sure that we support the Community Coalition and provide them with the resources to make that a successful organization. The other one I want to talk about is the Juvenile Resource Center. The Juvenile Resource Centers have been a valuable resource to our department. As you know, we come into contact with youth in our community that need support at their time of crisis, whether they've been involved with a curfew violation or some type of minor violation. The Juvenile Assessment, the Youth Assessment Center is a place where we can take young adults in their time of crisis and make sure they got proper resources. We have trained professionals there to provide screening assessment to make sure that they have resources so they can be successful. So maintaining support for the community is definitely one of the initiatives that we want to address with this goal. Initiative 1B is identifying problems and effective solutions with the public using best practices. What we talk about using best practices is we use intelligence-led policing with the Champaign Police Department, and I'll tell you what that is. Sounds like a complicated term, but it's really simple. Intelligence-led policing is a data-driven approach to identifying and solving problems. It takes community policing and problem-solving policing, and it bundles it with the data-driven approach. So what we can do is we collect all kinds of information, whether it's from police reports or calls for service, and we use that information to see where the hot spots and the problem areas are. And if we know there's a hot spot or problem area during a certain time of day, instead of having the officers drive all over town or in different areas of town, we know we need to put our officers where the problems are. And if you look at the recent issue we're dealing with is gun violence, we can look at the gun violence, we can look at when and where they're happening, and that's where we want our officers to be, and that's where we want them to proactively address the problem. But there's other areas that we can address as well with intelligence-led policing, and we can look at our calls for service, or what's our biggest problem as far as calls for service. And anybody want to take a guess on what our most frequent call for service is, or what our #1 arrest is in the city of Champaign? Julia?
Domestic violence.
That's correct. She kind of had the inside scoop here, but she had the gentleman here had the answer as well. It's domestic battery, domestic violence. That's a problem that we've been dealing with. And we use intelligence-led policing to identify repeat offenders and locations. So that's what we want to do, is we want to look, how can we solve that? How can we reduce that number? So we've done a couple of things to address that, and we've incorporated enhanced domestic violence protocol. And this protocol has been so successful that the other agencies in the county have identified that. And really, essentially, it is looking at those repeat offenders and seeing how we can hold them accountable through arrests or through prosecution through the state's attorney's office, but also how we can educate the victims and make sure that we can break that cycle of violence. And that's just one example of how you can use intelligence and policing to identify problems. Another area we want to utilize to provide effective solutions with the public is we want to take a look and partner with the other agencies in the county to implement the reentry program for Champaign residents that are returning from the Department of Corrections. We know we have residents, Champaign residents that are coming back to us from the Department of Corrections. We want to make sure that they have the resources to be successful. And by working with the partners in the community, we know that we have the resources here to do that. But at the same time, we want to make sure that those same individuals that are coming back to us are held accountable if they reoffend. We want to make sure that we have a program in place to help them be successful. Initiative 1C is use data and information to improve service delivery. One of the things we're looking at is trying to better utilize our resources with our partners in the county. And when I'm talking about partners, I'm talking about our law enforcement partners. We have Rantoul, Urbana, University of Illinois, Champaign County, and Champaign Police Department. And we all do our own thing as far as collecting information, writing reports, but we need to share that information a little bit better. And for years, the Champaign Police Department, the Urbana Police Department, and U of I have shared a records management system. And just this year, Rantoul and the Champaign County Sheriff's Office have joined us on that records management system. So we feel that by better sharing information, we'll be better able to address crimes and use intelligence-led policing to help us in those efforts. Initiative 1D is expand methods to provide timely and relevant information to the public. And as the Chief mentioned, we're really pushing the use of social media to get our message out. With social media, you can reach large groups that you couldn't before. Instead of relying on the electronic media to get our message out, we really think that we can get information out to our public in a better manner by the use of social media. So please join us on Facebook, Twitter. You can follow us and get all kinds of information that you couldn't before. We're also trying to utilize a studio in the building in our police department where we can create videos on public safety messages. So whether it's how to avoid being a victim of a vehicle burglary, keeping your items safe and out of view, or maybe it's some type of message we want to send out during the holidays, we'll be able to control that message and place it on our Facebook page. So please join us and you can get a lot of good information through social media. Another thing that we really need to educate our community on is crime data that is available to you via the internet. If you go to crimereports.com, it'll pull up a website where you can put in your address and City of Champaign will pop up, and you'll actually be able to see police reports that were generated in your neighborhood. You can look citywide if you want to, but there's a lot of information there. You can actually put in your address and set up alerts, so anytime there's a residential burglary or any assault or any type of crime that you want, it'll send you an email, or you can just go on there and take a look, and it'll give you the synopsis of the police report and when and where it happened. So it's very good information. And by sharing that information with our public, with our community, you're more aware of what's going on, so you know, wow, there's a rash of vehicle burglaries in my neighborhood. And if you see somebody that's suspicious, or you think something needs to be checked on, you're our eyes and ears, and you're able to give us a call and let us know what's going on, and through your help, we're able to police our neighborhoods. Initiative 1E goes along with that, educate the community regarding the realities of their role in crime prevention. We realize we can't do it alone. We have limited resources, and we need community's help to successfully police our community, keep it safe. So there's a couple of things that we're really promoting, and one is the use of Crime Stoppers. Crime Stoppers is a valuable organization that helps police officers all across the country. The tips that come into Crime Stoppers are truly anonymous. We cannot access that information, and we do not want to access that information. That information goes up to a server in Canada, and then it comes back down and is filtered back to the agencies in the U.S. So in order to get that, we would have to go to Canada, and they're not going to honor any type of court orders from the state. So we can't access that information if we want. So it is truly an anonymous system. You can do it via the internet through the TIPS program, or you can call the Crime Stoppers hotline. But just that one piece of information on a crime that we're trying to investigate, whether it's the color of a car, maybe a partial license plate, or a nickname. Oftentimes it's that one little piece that we don't have that a citizen can give us, and it'll put that puzzle, the rest of the puzzle together. So really utilizing Crime Stoppers and educating our citizens on Crime Stoppers is one of the initiatives that we're trying to push. Along with that, educating our citizens through outreach programs. And we really want to be engaged, as Chief spoke about, with our community and being there at the different whether it's neighborhood groups or park district activities. We want to make sure that we're out there in public acting in informal settings where you can get to know the officers. We do about 200 outreach activities a year, making sure that we're present where our citizens can see us and educating them on their roles and responsibilities. And then the last one I want to talk about is our neighborhood groups. I've been with the department a little over 20 years, and we've had a strong presence in the neighborhood groups throughout the city, and we want to continue that. We're doing things just a little bit differently this year. In previous years, we've had, the chief talked about the districts, 4 districts in the city. In previous years, we've had district lieutenants that were responsible for the different districts, and we would have, for many years, we would have the district lieutenants attend these meetings. The district lieutenants would go to the meetings, hear from the citizens, hear their concerns. They would go back to the police department and share that with the officers and the sergeants. But as the chief talked about, we're moving more towards engagement. We want the officers that work the area, that work the neighborhoods. We want them to be engaged with our citizens. We want them to attend the neighborhood meetings, and we want them to understand firsthand what the problems are in the areas that they patrol. And we really feel that by being part of that conversation, they'll be part of the solution. Instead of having to be told what to do, they'll be the one taking the initiative. So that's something that we've been doing since November, and we want to continue doing that by having our officers engaged in those neighborhood meetings. Okay, in the next section, I'll be turning over to Deputy Chief Daniels to talk about trust and trust building.
Good evening. Trust is extremely important, and it's one of our building blocks. And when we talk about trust, we're talking about the trust that police officers have with each other. We're talking about the trust that the public has with the officers, and also the trust that the officers have with the public. So when we talk about that building being a building block, we're talking about all those different things. The first initiative I want to talk about is increasing and maintaining diversity in the police force. And one of our action steps I want to talk to you about is we want to develop and implement a targeted recruitment plan for both lateral officers and also new hires. A lateral officer is an officer who already has experience with another police agency, and a new hire is someone who has no police experience. Well, in the next 3 to 5 years, we're going to have at least 31 officers who are going to reach the time and age to where they can retire. 31 officers out of 125. That's a lot of officers. 16 of those positions are command officers, including both deputy chiefs. We are going to have a substantially different police department in the next 3 to 5 years, and we have to make sure that we get the very best police officer at the front line. And it is good business to have a police department that's reflective of your community. So we want racial diversity, we want gender diversity, but we also have to have diversity of talent. We have crimes now to where we are using cell phone forensics and computer forensics on nearly every major crime that we're coming across. And hey, us old goats, we're not used to a lot of this technology that's going on, so we're doing our best to survive, and we are so blessed to have some of the most talented police officers when it comes to cell phone forensics and computer forensics in Central Illinois, and I would say even in the state of Illinois. One of our officers did a presentation to the National Association up in Chicago on this topic. So we are very fortunate to have that. We got to find all of the diversity of talent, but we need to make sure that our police department is reflective of our community. Another thing I want to talk about is the Explorer program. So we started the Explorer program this last year, and this is our second year of it. And what we do is we take kids between the ages of 14 and 20 who are interested in law enforcement, and we give them a uniform, and we teach them leadership. We teach them how to do traffic stops, how to interact with the public, how to do traffic control. we basically start them early on and let them taste what it's like to be an officer. And we get free work out of them too. We send them out and we don't even have to pay them. And they do stuff for us all the time. And I can tell you that when you look at our police department, we have several police officers who have been through Explore programs in our building and other police agencies, and they are some of our most talented officers. So all of the effort and energy that we pour into these kids today, even if they don't become a police officer, they're going to be better people for it, and many of them will end up being police officers. So the effort and energy that we pour into them just keeps multiplying year after year. Next initiative is improving communication with all stakeholders. And one thing I want to mention in that, with that initiative, is the Walk as One campaign. So we had one here in Garden Hills where we met across the street at the church. A bunch of us went out, door to door, knocking on doors, passed down information, but more importantly, listening to the people in the neighborhood. Because one thing's for sure, the people in the neighborhood, they know more about what's going on in that neighborhood than any police officer who's driving through. And we better listen to them, because sometimes we think we know what's the most important thing to work on, but that's not the way the people in the neighborhood feel. They would much rather us be concentrating on something else. So we need to focus and listen more than we speak. This gives us the opportunity to go out with church groups, community leaders, go door to door, knocking on doors, pass down information, and listening to people. That's the Walk as One campaign through the Community Coalition. Next thing I want to talk about is Initiative 2C, which is enhancing tools to encourage and consider feedback from employees and the community. So I mentioned, once again, that we went door to door with Walk as One. But we also need to consider how we use other methods to get feedback from the community. We need to think about community surveys. Are there online surveys that we can do? Are we looking at social media and getting feedback from the public the way that we should? And are we responding to that? When we see an issue, are we making sure that we are responding to it? So community surveys and feedback through social media are two of the things that we're looking at doing so that we can consider feedback from our community. Initiative 2D is increasing transparency in decision making through timely and effective communication. And one thing I'm going to tell you about now is probably one of the most important things that we've ever done, and that is we've created a use of force review board. So what used to happen, what's happened for many years, is if an officer uses a gun when responding to a crime and hurts someone with a weapon, we bring in officers from all over Champaign County, and they look at that case backwards and forwards. They make sure it's documented appropriately, and they make sure we don't miss anything. Well, we took that same concept under Chief Cobb, and we created a use of force review board. So now, every time we use force, we bring in our defensive tactics instructors, our firearms instructors, our professional standards lieutenant, some command officers and officers to view that and look at that backwards and forwards to learn. What did the officers do right? Are there areas that the officers could have improved in? Are we teaching the officers what they need to know? Are we giving them the right tools? Do we have the right policy? Do we have the right oversight? So we're basically taking that very thorough examination that we used to use just for when we used guns. Now every time we use force, we're looking at force that thoroughly so that we can learn from it and continue to improve. Next thing I want to talk to you about is annual reports. So we put a lot of effort and energy into looking at what we do. We look at our traffic stops. We look at our complaints. We look at our commendations when citizens say, hey, you did a good job. We look at our school resource officers. We look at our department activity. So we look at each one of our units and we try to determine what they're doing. Are they doing all the things that they should be doing? And we create reports on that. But one thing we haven't done so well at is making sure you can actually see it. So we're committed to making sure that when we create these reports that we put them on the web. This is one of the things that I've heard from our city manager. She likes that stuff on the web on a regular basis. And we are going to make sure we are committed to making sure that when we create those reports that we get them to where you can have access to them at any moment that you're on the web. Deputy Chief Gallo will now talk about employee wellness, training, and development.
All right, we talked about employee wellness, training, and development, talking about providing necessary training and opportunities for continued professional growth. As Deputy Chief Daniels alluded to, we've got a lot of change that's happening at the police department as far as new employees. If you look at the last 3 years at the Champaign Police Department, we've hired 26 new officers. And that trend is going to continue. In the next 3 to 5 years, we'll have 31 officers that have the time and age to retire. Now, that doesn't mean they're all going to walk out the door, but we need to be prepared for that. So part of the strategic plan is a succession plan, planning for the future. How do we prepare not only our officers, but our department to transition during that time? So we're looking at examining and improving our career development, and making sure that we identify our future leaders that are going to step into those command positions. We need to sit down and examine and talk to our employees and set goals so we can understand who are our next field training officers and what can we do to make them better prepared to be a training officer, or future detectives. What courses can we identify to help them be prepared to be an investigator? And again, for our future leaders, we need to make sure that we're preparing them through training and career development so they are ready to lead the department when their time comes. Initiative 3B is provide needed resources for employee to meet department missions and goals. If you were to look into one of the squad cars, you'd be amazed at the technology that is in a squad car that goes into police work. If you can think about your personal life or your professional life, the amount of technology that has changed in the last 10 years, you look at smartphones. Everybody has a smartphone, everybody has a camera. But you can see how it impacts law enforcement by looking into a squad car. You have radio, you have a computer in every single car, you have lights, and you have a camera. If any one of those go down, the squad is of no use, it goes down. If we don't have a functioning camera, the squad is not used, because that's how important video is for our profession. So we need to make sure that we have the technical support to make sure that our officers have the cameras and the computers that are operating for our department. So really that is a serious goal. If we're going to leverage technology and stay with the advances in technology, we need to make sure that we have the technical support to do that. So it's very important for us to meet that goal. Another area we talked about is to improve our employee wellness. We know that officers are involved in a number of critical incidents, and they have to handle some situations that are very challenging and difficult. We realize our employees are human, and they have issues that they need to deal with, and whether it's something that they really, maybe they handled a bad accident where there was a child involved, or maybe there was a situation that really, caused them some stress. We know it's a stressful job, and we need to make sure that we have avenues for them to be able to deal with it. So we've implemented a chaplains program, and it's just an opportunity. If they need to talk to somebody, we need to make sure that resource is there. So we've been very successful. We brought in 5 chaplains into our department, and they're able to interact with the officer. So if the officer needs to talk to somebody, they know there's somebody there that can listen. And that's really important, because we know if our officers are healthy and well, that they'll be better able to serve our citizens, and that's very important to us. Initiative 3C, foster an environment that encourages open and honest communication. And what we're really talking about here is unconditional respect. And I'm going to take a stab at defining that for you. Unconditional respect is having honor and regard for one another, regardless of our background, regardless of our differences, regardless of race, religion, or our cultural differences. It's understanding that and appreciating each and every contact, each and every citizen as a human being. It's how we view and treat one another. And many of us learn at a very early age, you would treat others as you want to be treated. And that's what we're really encouraging our officers. And that is the unconditional respect that the chief was talking about. Now, unconditional respect is so important for us that we incorporate it into our promotional process. So if you want to be a sergeant or lieutenant, you need to not only understand unconditional respect, but you have to demonstrate it. So we made it part of our promotional process, where that was one of the reading topics for the promotional process and the test that was given for sergeants and lieutenants. But we also want to make sure that all of the employees get through this, and we have a class called Strategic Awareness that we are making sure that every single employee in our department goes through this training and understands what we're talking about when it comes to unconditional respect. Another area that we're looking to improve on the open, honest communication is how we communicate, how we get the message out to our officers to make sure that they understand the direction that the chief is providing. But not only getting the message down, we need to be able to make sure that we're hearing from our employees, because oftentimes they have good ideas and we need to be receptive to those ideas, and we need to make sure that the information is flowing back to the chief as much as possible. So that's an area that we're really trying to improve. We have 125 officers that work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and trying to make sure that they all hear the message when they're not always there during the daytime is something that we have to focus on to make sure that night shift officers get the same information as the day shift officers. Initiative 3D, develop opportunities to align employee actions with desired results. Really what we're talking about here, are we rewarding the employees for providing positive reinforcement for the actions that we want? Are they demonstrating unconditional respect in their interaction with our citizens? What we're talking about is how do we evaluate the employees? How do they get the feedback on if they're doing a good job or not? And how do we correct them if they're not? So what we did is we totally revamped our evaluation process. We sought input from our line officers and our civilian staff. And we asked them, what does being proactive mean? What are the anchors that you define as being important? And is it in line with our goals and our strategic plan? And we put together a new evaluation system that our officers are being evaluated this year, and we hope to utilize that with our command staff as well in the future. Next area we're going to go into is best practices, policy, and oversight. Develop an appropriate staffing model, and that will be covered by Deputy Chief Brady.
Basically, with this first initiative on this building block that I want to talk about is, it says determine appropriate staffing level so employees can fully serve the community. Really what we want to do is, what changes do we need to make so that officers can go after the worst of the worst problems, the most challenging things that are happening in neighborhoods, the people that need to be dealt with, rather than deal with lower level issues. So one thing that we're looking at is how we improve our teleserve process. So there are many crimes that are lower level, but they're still very important to solve, and they're very important to the people that they happen to. And we want to hear from them. But a lot of people don't necessarily want a police officer to show up at their house, pull the squad car in front of the house, walk on up, walk into the house and take a report. Many people are more comfortable with certain kinds of crimes to just call the police department, give their information over the phone, and be done with it. Get their case number, and then they're finished. Well, we believe we can use volunteers a lot more effectively to do that, and also free up our officers' time to concentrate on the more serious issues that are going on in our city. So we want to improve our teleserve process. Next initiative is streamline administrative processes to free employees to engage in proactive activities. So they're actually out moving about and making sure that they're operating in their neighborhoods. One thing I want to talk about there, it kind of goes along with the teleserve process, and it's improving the process for self-reports. So initially I talked to you about teleserve, where people are calling in reports. Well, now with the internet, a lot of people would like to just go online, fill out their information with certain kinds of crime, hit send, they get a case number back, we communicate via email, and once again, the citizen's happy because they're served very quickly, they get to move on with their life, they don't have an officer showing up at their house. The officer is then free to also stay out in the neighborhood and concentrate on the issues that are impacting your neighborhoods, and you want your officers engaging in. Another thing is electronic reports going paperless. So when the chief first walked in, he saw, hey, you guys are killing a bunch of trees. Officers write reports. They then copy reports, send them to supervisors, sign off on them, and then they get sent to the state's attorney's office, and there's all kinds of trees getting killed. But we have technology now where we can electronically send that information. Go green, save those trees. And also what happens is it also helps maintain a record of where cases go. You figure with 70,000 calls for service, 10,000 police reports, 1,500 to 2,000 of them pretty darn serious, there's a lot of paper being generated, a lot of interviews that are being done, and keeping track of where that is and where it's been sent to, that's very, very important. So electronic, paperless systems are a lot more efficient, save trees. But also, this goes into the next area that I want to talk to you about, is improving our case management system. So we have all these hundreds thousands of cases. When a citizen gives a report to us, that citizen should know every single thing that should be done is being done. But you can imagine this many moving parts coming around, there could be the opportunity for something to fall through the cracks. We should have followed up on something and we didn't. We should have sent something to the lab and we didn't. We want to make sure that our case management system is airtight and everything that should be done is being done, and that kind of goes along with the electronic management system. Deputy Chief Gallo mentioned that all the major agencies are now on ARMS, the same records management system. So we're all sharing crime data that's occurring on all the crimes in the area. That helps us make good decisions and focus in on the criminals who are doing the most damage to our area, and that's a good thing. But the system we're using is kind of old and it's homegrown. And there's a lot of good companies out there that have generated records management systems that give us access to technology that make our employees even more efficient and give us better information on the front line to make the best decisions. In the next couple years, we're going to be looking and talking to all the area agencies on, do we just keep continuing to improve this records management system, or do we try to be bold, go to a new records management system that can even give us access to more technology and make our employees have better information to make better decisions on the front line. Next thing I want to talk to you about is Initiative 4C, which is streamline the system to address unserviceable employees. Now, an unserviceable employee is someone who's not in your neighborhoods, that's not making sure you're safer because they're injured, they're sick, they're in training, or the position is just vacant. Right now, we have about 20 unserviceable positions in the police department. That's a lot of officers that are not on the street making sure that you're safer. And we need to make sure that that number gets lowered to the lowest number that we possibly can. So we have a spot in our plan that's called Exploring the Best Practices to Reduce Officer Injuries. We want to make sure that's in our plan because we want to make sure that everything we do is geared towards making sure that our officers come home to their loved ones at the end of their shift. But also, that only doesn't just focus on the officers, that also focuses on the citizens that they're interacting with. Because if the officers are safer, the citizens are safer. So even though we mention keeping officers safe, we're also talking about helping citizens keep them safe also. Initiative 4D is leveraging technology to better utilize resources. So I'm going to mention a few things that deal with technology now that will help our police department and our citizens. One is exploring the use of cameras to improve public safety. So on the University of Illinois campus, there are lots of cameras along Green Street, kind of closer to the core of campus. And cameras can certainly keep citizens safe, can help solve crime and help prevent crime. We've seen worldwide where those surveillance cameras have helped officers solve crime and prevent crime. The University of Illinois and the City of Champaign currently in discussions on how we can increase the number of cameras along the Green Street corridor, because we got lots of citizens moving along that corridor, so that we can have more cameras out there, have access to more information to keep citizens safer. Another thing that we're looking at is replacing our mobile data computers that are in our squad cars. So right now they're wired into the squad car. The officers have to write the reports or operate off of them, and they're pretty much stuck in the squad car. Well, the chiefs talked about how important engagement is. You can't be very engaged to your citizens if you're stuck in a squad car. And also, sometimes you need access to that technology outside the squad car. So we believe that there is the opportunity to take those old wired computers in those squad cars and give officers tablets so the officers can access that technology outside their police car. Make sure they have great information and the best information possible outside that squad car. So now instead of writing that report in the squad car and being stuck in a car somewhere, I can take that tablet out, maybe go to a park bench, write a report while I'm watching kids play basketball. Or I can take that tablet out while I'm on a scene and I can make sure that I have good information outside that car to help keep citizens safe and help keep the officers safe. Another issue when it comes to technology that we're getting ready to replace is our in-car cameras. So right now we have about 40 squad cars. They all have cameras, and those cameras record traffic stops primarily, or interactions with citizens when they're close to the squad car. Well, we all know there's a lot of stuff that happens outside the squad car, and that's why people are talking about body cameras. So we're taking a very hard look at body cameras, and we're not just looking at them, we're actually testing them already. For several months, we've had several companies in, and we're testing them on the street right now, because we're seeing how they work, what are the best companies, how the technology can be. But one thing that we've learned in our research is that there's a lot of police agencies that have bought those cameras, and then within months they've taken them off the officer and shelved them. And there's one reason for that. That is the back-end support that's required for those body cameras is significant and requires a lot of money and manpower. And let me explain. So our in-car cameras generate a lot of video every time a traffic stop happens. And the state's attorney's office, they need that video. Well, the only way for us to get that video now is to have up to 2 officers at a time burning video and sending those discs over to the state's attorney's office. Very cumbersome, takes a lot of time. It's cumbersome for the state's attorney's office too. They certainly don't want to have to wait for it. If they need that information, many times they're making decisions very quickly, and they need that information very, very fast, and they've got to wait for us to get it done. So Chief Cobb and Deputy Chief Gallo, they were exposed to a company called MediaSolve that actually helps police agencies archive, retrieve, and deliver digital information when we need it. So whether it be a police report that is digital, or picture, or videos, that we can have an online system that's all archived in the correct way to where a police officer doesn't have to burn that information. All we have to do is give access to the state attorney's office. They can view any video they want to in real time. So then if we could implement a system like that, then body cameras become a very real possibility where we could actually generate, if you can imagine how much video is generated by a police officer with a body camera. I mean, we're having a hard enough time with 40 cameras in a squad car. Imagine putting them on 90 police officers and have them turn them on every time they stop out of a car to interact with someone. The amount of video goes up 10 times. So you're talking about lots and lots of video, lots and lots of effort to keep track of that video. So we are studying it very, very thoroughly, and we want to create a system where it seamlessly operates and we can use it effectively. And we also have to do it cost effectively too. We got to make sure we have the money to pay for it. So, but we are taking it very seriously. We're looking at it very closely. Last thing I want to talk to you about is exploring and discussing the implementation of tasers for community safety. Chief Cobb, Deputy Chief Gallo, and myself believe that officers should be allowed to use tasers when appropriate for community safety and officer safety. Unfortunately, police work can be violent at times, or there can be the potential for violence at times. And officers get injured, citizens get injured. Independent research has shown that agencies that use tasers, that their officer injuries go down 70%, and that the suspect injuries go down over 45%. So lots of people are saved from those injuries. That can be very cost prohibitive, but also that means your officers aren't serviceable. They're not out on the street because they're back at the department recovering from the injuries that occurred, that we believe can be significantly reduced if the agency has tasers. We are looking at a reduced implementation schedule that we're going to be talking about, but we do believe that now is the time with a lot of the initiatives that we've already started and are continuing to start, that now is the time for officers to have tasers. We turn this over to Chief Cobb now to talk about our next steps.
Pretty much there, you guys have seen the entire strategic plan in its entirety. The next steps that we're getting into is one, we're going to take this plan into our council chamber. This is the last of 5 dialogues. We've been around all the districts around the city and did a special one on the campus community so we could talk with our students before they left at graduation last weekend. But we're going to take all the information we gather and the information we gather from you all, put it in a council report, and present it to our city council to talk with them about it. At this time, I want to open it up. We have Tracy Parsons here with us, Tracy has been kind enough to be our facilitator, so we can get into the question, feedback, and suggestion period. But this is your opportunity to say what you think about the bill. Do you think we're heading in the right direction? And if not, where can we improve it at? Questions, clarification on things that you've heard, this is your opportunity. So, Tracy?
Well, thanks, Chief. You said everything I was going to say. So maybe what we can do, though, is start with the strategic plan, offer what constructive things you have, questions, concerns about the strategic plan. I know as we've gone around to the other parts of the community to have this conversation, we've got great feedback. Police have got great feedback, which is helpful. So anyone have comments, thoughts, questions about the strategic plan itself? Yes, ma'am.
I think that just about all the questions that I had have been answered, and I don't think I need that. I think that all the questions that I had have been answered, and I think that this is great. It looks like you're heading in the right direction. I mean, you have everything analyzed as far as what you're going to do with the community, how you're going to work with the associations and organizations. I think you're doing a good job, and I would like to know how I would be able to kind of get in on this as a civilian. And I like to do volunteer work, and so I would like to learn more about, you know, how I could get in. I like working with students, and I think that if we could get into the schools and get, you know, more of the youth to lead the other youth, and, you know, that would kind of spread the word. We need to spread the word. You know, we need to get it out there. This room should be full. It literally should be full with people, you know, all the advertising, everything. It just needs to be out there some more, you know. But I think that you're going in the right direction, and it sounds really good.
Thank you.
Good thoughts?
A lot of ways I would encourage people to get involved. I'll try to kick it off, and you can talk about some of the department stuff as well. But Community Coalition is a great start. We generally meet the third Wednesday of the month. Excuse me. Second Wednesday of the month? Okay, I'm mistaken. Second Wednesday of the month. I would encourage you to come out there. There's a lot of social service agencies that engage there. The schools are there. They have mentoring programs, whether it be one-to-one mentoring, talks mentoring, all of the great ways to get involved if you want to go with students. At the same token, the walks are coming up. I know we're in the process of planning a walk for June. Having people there with us, being engaged, getting your ideas. There's a lot of initiatives that comes out that gives us the opportunity to work together, leveraging resources. That's the reason I always go back to the coalition, because our park districts are there, both Champaign and Urbana. Our schools are there, both Champaign and Urbana. Our cities are there, our county government is there, our state's attorney's office is there, all law enforcement agencies are there. And it's our opportunity to say, all right, how can we take the resources that we have and leverage them to get the biggest bang for our buck, so that we are truly working together serving our community opposed to working as separate entities. Troy, I know you talked about some volunteer stuff.
Yeah, I'd like to get your contact information.
Okay.
Put you to work.
I'd like that.
All right.
What was the time and place of those meetings?
So they are the second Wednesday of the month. We 3:30 to 5. Primarily the meetings are either at Champaign Library or Champaign Police Department. And if you go to communitycoalition.org, you will be able to find out where those meetings are taking place. Champaign Community Coalition. Other thoughts, questions? Yes, ma'am.
I'm president of our Neighborhood Association.
Double mics.
Anyway, everything sounds really good, and I think that it's definitely headed in the right way. I think technology especially will be helpful. I think, speaking from the association aspect, is only tripping thing that we have is, and I'm not saying we're against it or we don't like it, but we're struggling with losing our lieutenant. Of course, we were lucky because we had Lieutenant Schaefer. So, but he came to all of our steering committee meetings, and he also came to the neighborhood meetings. And so he always knew everything that was going on in the neighborhood. If we had a question about something that was going on in the neighborhood, he had an answer for us. And for the steering committee especially, to be able to go back, because I get a lot of people emailing me or sending me messages on Facebook. And I'll take, like, even for instance, once I had somebody say, there was a vacant house, there was garbage filled up, the garbage can was in the street, the people left, it was abandoned, the garbage was in the street, you know. So I called, I actually called David Oliver, because I couldn't get hold of Lieutenant Schaefer. But I mean, you know, they got on it, called police went, they cleaned up the stuff, you know, I mean, it was garbage. But it was just like a real smooth transition. And now we're reading in the paper incidences that are happening. I know there was guns fired on Cynthia, like 6:30 in the evening. That's concerning to me. I live nearby, and I don't know anything about it, but that's early in the evening for guns to be fired. And then there was a van that was torched, you know, and we're just kind of trying to piece things together, how that all took place. And so I know that we have to give kudos to the Champaign Police Department because, I mean, we are your biggest fans. Because without the Champaign Police Department, we would be lost. And we've gone through all the transition where we had the CAT team, crime was really high, and how I got involved was I got robbed. They broke in my brand new back door and my brand new screen porch, but my front door was open. They could have walked through the house because I never locked my door. But now, you know, and then money got tight back then, and the CAT team, I mean, they brought the crime way down, but then they had to take the CAT team away, and so then, because of all the money and, you know, when the housing crisis happened and everything else, and then, you know, it's just like sometimes we feel the heat of everything that goes on in the city. Excuse me. But now we kind of feel a little bit, a little bit separated because we're not in tune as much as we were before. And I'm really not complaining that we don't have Lieutenant Schaefer, just hoping that we get as much information from the officers that attend the meetings as we did from Lieutenant Schaefer, because it's helpful for me to be able to address it. It's helpful, I mean, Lieutenant Schaefer was always free to give his number out, and anyone could call and talk to him. And now we kind of have to go through a whole process, which makes it a little bit harder because everybody wants information fast, you know. So, but as far as everything else that was presented, I mean, I think it sounds great.
So we know one of the questions is around attendance at the neighborhood meetings and communication information.
No, excellent concern. I mean, we got some growing pains that we're working through as we make this transition. But one of the biggest things as we move the lieutenants from the district back to the shift is trying to improve quality service. We truly do believe as we're pushing the workload down to our officers are going to do a better job being direct with our citizens. We want our officers to be engaged. The crimereports.com, we sit down, we work out and make sure you understand how to use them, but at the same time, the officers can be armed with information. We're hoping to leverage it. How many officers work in this district up here, Bill?
We have about,
Turn officers.
we have about 18 officers that work in this district. So in regards to getting the information back to you, we need to make sure that Officer Coleman is bringing statistics and information. He has access to that same information. We need to make sure he brings it to the meeting. So if there's other information that you would like provided, again, as the chief talked about, some growing pains, you know, we need to make sure that he's got that information so you're getting that back. The other thing that I'd like to mention is if you can't get a hold of Officer Coleman, we have lieutenants on each shift. So if you want to speak to a lieutenant during the day or evening hours, make that information available. I'm always available during the day, and I can provide information as well.
But in addition to Officer Coleman, the reason I point out the 18, I want those 18 officers to know you and you to know them. That's the reason why we sent the names out to everyone in the association so you can have that information. 18 of those guys, we want all 18 to provide the same service that Dave Schaefer did. That's engaging. And that's what we're pushing. That's what we want our guys to do. Coleman took the initiatives and comes to the meeting, but there are other guys there that can work with them as well because they're all part of the solution. When they're not doing that engagement stuff, that's when we need to get involved and make sure that happens. That's part of the growing pains as we're transitioning into this. Guys are starting to pick up on it and buying into it and doing these things. I think you'll get better service as we work through it. Just like when we went from the shift into the district, there were some growing pains there. We were in the district about 10 years now. Now we're transitioning again. As we work through them, I'm hoping when we talk here in a few months, you'll be a lot happier with our service.
Chief, can I have one thing? We definitely want to thank your association though,
Yes.
because as far as that association goes, we get unprecedented information regarding both associations. So one of the reasons why you guys had so much success with us addressing your issues is because we knew what your issues were, because you guys made sure we knew your issues. So we appreciate that.
Yes.
And if we had that throughout the city, we'd be stronger. So Garden Hills Association, kudos to the whole association.
Thank you.
The other half.
I just retired after 19 years of being in the school district, and I still come stuff. We're doing programs to, when you talked about people coming back into the system, what about preventive? Like, I remember the days when officers would come and teach the youth the DARE program. Did that, I know money is an issue with everything, but would that help? Because there's a lot of kids that seem to think that, BB guns are okay to walk around with and things like that. Are those, you're talking about getting back in the schools, but what about preventive programs or maybe a little information to them?
Take that there, Chief Gallup.
So we still have officers in the schools, our school resource officers. Sure. But in addition to that, we have a risk watch program where we offer a lot of information. There's a lot of programs that offer we partner with the fire department and other organizations to go in and teach our youth. It's not the same as DARE as far as sole focus on drug resistance, but there is presentations that happen in our elementary schools. But it's followed up with our officers in high school and middle school. So we still have a very strong presence in our schools.
So do you feel that the risk watch program is strong as their program? Because, I have seen them really engaged in it like they did in the classrooms.
So the question was, is the risk watch program as strong?
Effective.
Well, there were many studies on DARE and the effectiveness of DARE, and part of the problem that DARE had is there wasn't any follow-through in middle school and high school. So while DARE was effective with the elementary school, not a lot of drugs in elementary school, right? So when they get to junior high and high school, that's where there wasn't any follow-through. So by doing the risk watch programs and being in the elementary school, now we have the SROs in the middle school and the high school, we do have that follow-up. So I would argue that, yeah, it is as effective, not more effective.
Maybe it's just, we are capturing everything that you're asking, so maybe how do we communicate what programs we do have to connect young people and the messaging that we have through the programs is what I heard you ask about, so can you strengthen that? Yes, sir.
You talked about some of the community engagement stuff, like the walk as one. I just want to know what are some other examples of community engagement events that we participate in.
All right, so like Joe had said, Deputy Chief Gallo had mentioned that we do about 200 things a year. So we'll do night out with Neighborhood Watch. We go to community meetings. There are times that we have we open up our building. What's that?
Touch a truck?
Yeah, touch a truck, where we open up our building, we put our trucks out where kids can talk. We have officers that mentor in the school. We have officers that teach sports in the school. We have officers that will actually go out with kids and run with them and play basketball with them. So there's lots of different kinds of engagement. We get invited to many, many groups to talk. But I think that what you're asking for, once again, is almost what you're asking for, which is, hey, I'm willing to help. And really, when you mentioned it, I thought, well, we were talking about volunteers for teleserve, but really, we may be able to use volunteers in a whole host of areas, almost like Explorer Scouts. If you got someone who wants to go out and help push messages. So I'd like to get your contact information. If that's something that you're interested in doing, maybe we can find something that you're interested in doing with us that would help.
And I would include these community meetings as part of the engagement. as you know, with the Clark Police and getting out, hearing from residents, been in each part of the district that,
We want citywide, all the districts, we hit every district so far, yeah.
so, great question. In this high-powered side of the room over here, any question?
I think we have a question over here.
One thing you did say, with all the officers that are going to be retiring and all the changes, Garden Hills, I'm speaking for Garden Hills, so I can't talk about anybody else. And we've always been affected on change. Change has killed us every single time. So are you prepared for these changes? Are they going to, be a lull? Because I know when there was a hiring freeze, then they were scrambling to, hiring all these new officers, but then they had to go through the training, and that's a long, lengthy time. And it was hurting us a lot, with crime out here. I mean, we were just getting plummeted. So are you prepared for these changes so that we don't have any kind of downtime?
We are working very hard with all city departments as we go through this transition. I think we've already alluded to, I've been with the city about 3 years, and when I first got here, we just started coming off that hiring freeze. And in 3 years I've been here, we've already hired 26 officers. So we're happy. So we've already gotten through it, and we've pretty much kept pace with what's going on in our community. We're looking at another 31 that we potentially may have to replace over the next 3 to 5 years. One of the things we've been working since I've gotten here is looking at not losing institutional knowledge. So we have a lot of veteran officers leaving. We want to keep that information there. But at the same token, making sure that we put succession planning in place. So we're going to be continue to work. Our HR department, our city managers department have been working with us to make sure we keep the hiring process streamlined and so that we get as many resources through as quickly as possible. Recognize to become a police officer, it takes about 18 months worth of training unless they're a lateral. If they lateral into us, we can get them through most of the time around about 9 months to a year, sometimes a little quicker if they come from somewhere really close to us, like one of our local agencies. But like I said, we're going to keep working through it. The thing is getting the right person to come in with great temperament that we want so they can provide the quality service that you all desire.
I think that the presentation was amazing and it was detailed and, like I said, shows it moving in the right direction. I don't have an expectation that the police department can solve all of the community problems. And so I wonder, like maybe like a behavioral intervention team like they have on campus, if something can be replicated in the community. So you have a police officer, community association, maybe health professionals or psychologists like myself that may not be able to say anything, but a lot of the behavioral issues with youth and adults may also be within DCFS system or Illinois Choices. And then then you start to discuss families or folks that are having issues, and you have everybody in the room that can begin to provide resources. So I'm wondering if that's an option.
Great suggestion. Definitely look at that in the notes. It's something always to look at. I know there's a lot of conversation around our community right now around mental health issues and concerns, looking at resources. I think this Friday is going to be a big meeting to discuss that and look at some different options. Our mental health board at the county level has done a lot with it. Our sheriff's office is doing a lot looking at it and saying what we can do to reduce the number of individuals with mental health issues from going into the jail and using that as place to keep them opposed to giving them the resources that they need and hopefully get them better. So there was a lot of dialogue around that. You took it even a little further saying, hey, let's look at it around maybe some of the child safety issues that we're looking at, DCFS, things of that nature. Those are all great concepts. Just figure out how best to do that, how to get all the resources together to leverage it. It's definitely something to consider. Thank you. Yes.
So what you brought up certainly are areas we hadn't thought of necessarily before. One area that we are talking about, though, is using that model of bringing community members in who can wrap around services and have those services addressed to our worst offenders who are committing the worst crimes. So that when you bring these groups in, and this model's been used in other parts of the country that we're talking about and we're studying right now, you do two things. You, one, warn them this is what's going to happen to you if you don't straighten up. But at the same time, you say, we care about you, and all these people around here want to help you, but understand if you don't take advantage of this, all of our resources are going to be addressed towards you, because we're not going to have people shooting up our neighborhoods, and you are connected to people, or you are someone who shoots up our neighborhoods. So using that same model, but towards our worst offenders.
Are there
And
any-
preventive, I was talking about
Preventive.
preventive. Like you might have youth that are starting, so the worst offenders, but also maybe someone that's on their way. And you have professionals in the room that, can talk to each other.
So part of that would be the assessment center. We talked about being able to utilize that as maybe one of the spaces where the youth conversations are taking place about specific kids. And I know as Chief just shared, there's conversations taking place about the adult population as well. But the point is very well taken about how do we connect and wrap supports around adults and youth. Carletta, can I ask your question since we have a break?
First of all, again, thanks for you all going all over the city, and I understand what you're saying as far as the room should be full, but again, with social media, this will be on YouTube as soon as UPTV, I just turn it over to them and whenever they turn it on, but I'll let people know when it's actually out there. The only thing that I am wrestling with is, at one of the meetings, I had asked the question about the data from the staff and the officers, and I know all of you are on board and you're in charge, but I know 100% compliance with all the officers, or whatever the correct word might be, would be very good. Our city would, again, be excellent. But is there any way that, I know you said that the data was not available, is there any way, because they'll know what the community thinks, we should also know what the staff, because they may not have been on board, or the officers may not have been on board with everything. What are their thoughts? What they believe should happen, or with the plans? And then the last thing, if you could just mention the date, the timelines that you have. I know June 23rd keeps sticking in my mind. That's when you're presenting it to the city council, but I think there was like some other timelines in between. If you could just repeat those for the camera.
Try to get the first question. I think you asked for the raw data from the surveys, this and that. We don't have that. Once we compiled this plan, this and that raw data is gone. There was no need, it was draft work. We got rid of that. And one of the reasons why we got rid of our officers, they were forced to answer. We got their information. We collaborated it, put it in there, this and that. And then protecting their confidentiality, we forced them to do it. We didn't retain that stuff. So I'll be honest with you there. So that's first. When you asked me that question before, I didn't know where it was at, so I had to go and find out. So when I found out, we don't have it. So that's that. Two, as far as dates, June 23rd is the date we're looking to bring our information to our city council. Be at city council meeting. That's a Tuesday night at 7 p.m. That is the tentative date that we're looking at presenting everything. I don't think that's going to change on the agenda, but that's the date we're slated to go. Okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I'm officially here as a citizen tonight. So, one of the things I'd like to say is I'm very appreciative for the police department. I have an older son who went through the Explorer program, enjoyed it immensely. Knew all the officers at his school, had great experiences. People still see them to this day, and they will greet him and ask him hi, how he's doing. So I think that's a great thing for the kids. But I do think our youth is really where a lot of our problems are at. And I'd like to hear the fact that we don't feel that drugs are the issues in the elementary schools, but what are the issues in elementary schools? One of the things that I think might be is bullying. Even though my son did go through Explorer program and that, he did have issues with bullying, and as a result, through his high school years, did have some struggles in his high school years. But luckily, he had parents, friends that were able to help him through that, and now he's 21, he's got a great job, he's a kid still, but he's okay. But I have next to me my 11-year-old who will be in middle school next year and who has been bullied. So that is a concern. Again, drugs and issues, yes, they're out there, and that's not something that we can turn our eye to, but what
do you guys, is bullying a consideration? Is it a concern? Is the school district working with you to try to curb that? My concern with that is that there's so much pressure being put on the teachers nowadays that, well, back when I was in school, you didn't do half of the stuff that you did, and you respected the teachers. I know that that's not the case anymore. So, A, what do you guys think about bullying? And is the school district working with you guys to try to figure out what some of those issues are at the elementary school levels so that when the kids get to middle school, high school, maybe some of those can be taken care of?
I'll take a first crack at it. As far as the work that we're doing at elementary school level, most of the time the work that we do is around the wristwatch program. We go in and we talk about different topics that are set up that are worked into the curriculum with the classroom teacher. In addition, on case by case, there are times that our school resource officer may make themselves available and go into our elementary schools and talk and do some counseling and things of that nature at the request of the building principal. But a lot of times the issues that they're dealing with at the elementary school level doesn't rise to a police level, and nor should it rise to a police level. I know that the elementary school principals put a lot of time and they work with other entities in the community elements come to mind, where they come in and they help and use the social service providers in our community to help our young people deal with some of the things that happen in life. Bullying is a reality. That does happen. That's something that we would love for it not to occur. And if it's severe enough, it can become criminal. But recognize when it comes to, from a legal standpoint, the age of understanding in the state of Illinois, that state attorney here, she can correct me on my age if I don't get it right, it's generally around age 7. Before we start putting people in jail and hold them accountable for actions that they do that with a young person, we're going to be around 10 or 11. It depends on the cognitive skills and where they're at. When we look at those ages, we're talking to 5th graders or up. That is not our goal, and what we're trying to do is lock up 11, 10-year-olds. That's not a police role. So I understand the concern. There's a lot of things we have to deal with. We have to work with our other parents within the building, as well as our building teachers and principals. But those are issues that the police are going to do a lot to help prevent, educate towards, but that's not something we're looking to use intervention as far as us to get involved and putting handcuffs on kids and taking them to jail.
So we do have an anti-bullying presentation that the SROs have presented to you before, and it's by request. If there's an issue or problem, we're happy to come in and make that presentation to one of the schools. I can't tell you how many times it's been done this year, but we do have a presentation for that.
Okay.
And then also, I would just share from the community side, I know that there's been a number of organizations that do anti-bullying training, hold sessions community-wide. It is a real serious issue, especially with social media today. And, you know, teaching kids that once you get that sin, you can't take it back, and the impact is really huge.
So there are also a number of things that we're trying to do at the Youth Assessment Center, programs and options that are available there to help address bullying issues. The Assessment Center is not just for law enforcement related offenses. The school districts certainly can refer kids to that center, or even you could walk in or call as a citizen and say, I need help. We have peer court there where other youth sit and hear a situation and then provide feedback and make decisions about what should happen. We have mediation services there where if there is a situation involving 2 or more young people, we have mediators who sit down with those individuals, parents, their families, and try to come to a resolution. So there are options there as well to address bullying issues. If there's a crime that's committed, depending on the age, as has been discussed, certainly that's something that my office is going to look at, whether we want to bring the offender into the juvenile court system, depending on the severity of the offense. Certainly, we're looking generally at age 10 or older when we're talking about actually filing a court petition and bringing a kid into the court system. Generally, well, not generally, as a matter of law, we can't hold a kid in our detention center until they're 13 or older. And so that age range of 10 to 13, we are working a lot with court services, probation, trying to get programming needed to keep that kid out of our detention center when they turn 13. And I would also say social media is a huge issue. We're seeing a lot of issues starting on social media. Kids putting things out there, saying things that are leading to other issues that are just ballooning into huge situations that sometimes end up in physical fights in the schools. And so as parents, we have to be very aware of what's going on, what our kids are doing, what's being put out there on social media, so that we can address those issues hopefully before they become criminal offenses. So all of that is certainly of great concern to the police departments as well as my office. And again, our assessment center that's the purpose of it, to keep those kids out of our court system and address these issues at a community level.
And one thing, Tracy, on that, the SRO that took the primary lead on developing the anti-bullying presentation was School Resource Officer Jonathan Westfield. Jonathan Westfield was asked to go all over the county to do this presentation, very successful program, and now he's on the school board. My point is to say that you have a school board member who I would consider to be an expert in anti-bullying who cared enough about it to basically take the lead in the initiative to create this program. And he's on your school board.
And again, I think it's a great thing. I'll do it anyway. I think it's a great thing. I also coached volleyball for 15 years, so I have seen kids who struggle. I don't want kids in the system. That's not the point. But I just, sometimes I wonder with the bullying, it starts and it may be very innocent, but I think, some of the issues I see happening are people are fighting and it's retaliation and, is that, it starts social media. But again, a lot of times kids will be bullied and they'll just hold it in. They'll just hold it in. And again, you guys can only do so much, and I completely understand that, and I appreciate it. I just hope that, at least school district knows that it could be an issue and it is at least trying to be proactive by having, wristwatch and items like that in the school. So, that's just really important that, the school district continues to have a strong relationship with the police department, because again, growing up, I respected police officers. Every time I saw them, they always greeted me, and I think kids need to understand that that's the way that it should be.
I'm also a home daycare provider for 25 years, so I think that a lot of times when you have kids that are doing this, it's because they don't have the parenting at home. And I always wondered sometimes if an officer took that child home and addressed the issue with the parent, not on a threatening level, but just let the parent know that, hey, this is not going to be tolerated, because a lot of times those parents are doing things they probably shouldn't be doing. And the last thing they want to see is you guys knocking on their door. So, maybe they would make a little more initiative. It's probably too late at that point, at that age where, but maybe it will work enough. Because I have dealt with a lot of parents that they don't have any control. The kids run away, they're runaways. They just run the street. Once they turn 12, it's like there's no control. The parents have nobody to stand behind them when they have unruly kids. And I've seen it lots and lots of times over the years. So it just seems like maybe in the very beginning when they're young, if an officer is knocking on that door with that child, if he's getting in trouble at school or something, maybe that parent will say, hey, I better get this in check, or else, it's going to be more problems for them than down the road. It's just my opinion, because, nobody wants to, I've heard from other officers in the past, they don't want to scare kids with, by threats, but yet it's serious. It isn't, it doesn't have to be threatening from you, but it's a serious problem, and it's a serious thing that they're doing. And no other child should be afraid of another student, So if it starts young, maybe they can stop, or at least might help.
Thank you for the suggestion.
I know Chief Cobb said you could ask him to come hang out with him in his car if you wanted to tonight. But, is there any final questions before we finish with that? Yes, ma'am.
Okay, well, I see questions, suggestions, and feedback. Okay, so now I'm going to have some more suggestions.
Okay.
And this is strictly Garden Hills. I'm only speaking for Garden Hills. And when you spoke earlier about hotspots, and we have hotspots, and I don't know, and I'm probably thinking on the terms of layman's thoughts, like North Madison Apartments. Okay, we were so excited when this took over new management, but I think they're worse than they were before. And it seems to me like because there's so much trouble, and I know there's some people that live across the street from them right now in the audience. There's so much trouble over there, and between the city with code violations, I'm sure there's thousands of them out there, and the police with the calls that they get there. Isn't there any way that, I mean, it's not just that particular place, but is there any way you can go to management and say, listen, you know, I mean, you've got manpower out there, the fire department's always out there, you know, and then when you've got city people out there for code violations, this is money, taxpayers' money that's being, and if they can't, I mean, it's simply a matter of them not renting to proper renters, you know, and the same thing goes with our huge list of deadbeat landlords. You know, when you have a property owner that has maybe 10 or 12 properties in Garden Hills, since we have 40% renters or rentals, if you've got one landlord that has numerous properties and he's got numerous calls to those properties, isn't there any way you can just tell him, look, you know, we're getting tired of this. Maybe this is something should go to city council where you start charging these people for all the calls you get, because they're not, you know, doing any kind of background check. And that's what's hurting Garden Hills is the rental property, and that's just the bottom line. And I think probably if you did a statistics of all the calls you get and all the violence or drugs, it's probably all rental property. And it's not to say it's bad to rent, because that's, I mean, the neighborhood association is not for homeowners, we're for all neighbors of Garden Hills. But, you know, it's not fair for the people who work hard to live in Garden Hills and want to make their home safe for their kids, and this guy next door doesn't give a rat's butt about his apartment or his house, and he's renting to anybody, and they're not safe, and it's not fair.
Well, thank you. Those are all things we can know. Yes, thank you.
Thanks, Joe.
My question, or I guess my feedback is that I know we talk about crime a lot, but when we are talking about crime in Garden Hills, I think that we're missing the point of where there are women, where there is a single woman and children, there will be men. And when there will be men bring in problems. And I feel like some of that support could come more from, you know, supporting the woman and the children to get rid of those men who bring those problems. And who, you know, their friends come, and then, you know, it becomes, you know, drug houses and things like that. And, you know, I know it's not really a police department thing, but I think you guys know enough of the men and the people who come in and out of different places that, you know, there needs to be some kind of support for the women. I mean, I know you guys have to do domestic violence and stuff, but I'm talking about actually going in and supporting these women and telling them, you know, you can get out of this situation, this will help, because what happens is it's just a new man, and then a different man with a different problem, and then we have more crime. And if that woman stays in Garden Hills, it doesn't matter, you know, where that man comes from. He's going to come into Garden Hills. And so I just wonder, you know, as you guys go along with your engaging process as far as engaging the community, I feel like, you know, supporting single mothers should be a big part of that, just because I know that crime in other areas like Country Brook is a big point of that, is because you have tons of single women and children. So I just wanted to throw it out.
Appreciate it. I mean, I think that's all good feedback, the things that definitely look at when I talk about. One thing I always want to make clear, it's always challenging to help anyone or those who don't want to help themselves sometimes. And in some situations, there are people who want to help and we can help them, the social service agencies can help them, but there are sometimes people choose not to. And that's not a crime, that's not illegal. Biggest challenge we run into in law enforcement a lot of time is we want to help someone and they don't want to help. And so that's part of it. I'm not saying that's all cases, but sometimes that is the biggest hurdle that we overcome a lot of time.
And I just wanted to add on that too. We talked a little bit earlier about the domestic violence initiative and the work that the Champaign Police Department has done to reduce domestic violence, to really focus on the repeat offenders, those guys who come in and who prey on women like you're talking about. From my perspective as a state's attorney, those are the most difficult and most important cases, especially when you're talking about those vulnerable victims and the children who are involved. We put a priority on that, both the departments and my office. Part of the initiative there with the enforcement was to make better cases by recording interviews so that when the woman shows up at my office and says, I don't want to go forward with this case, I've got her on video with the initial statement. Also, talking to the neighbors. Neighbors are so important in those kinds of situations. They hear things, they see things. So even if the victim doesn't want to go forward with the case for whatever reason, she's afraid, she's being threatened, she's financially dependent on the man, those neighbors, you, are so important to helping us get those guys out of that house and out of the situation, and hopefully then helping the woman become an independent, strong person who doesn't need those kinds of leeches coming in and causing the difficulties that you're talking about. So that enforcement piece has been really important and very helpful, but it always comes back to, from my perspective as a prosecutor, creating those strong cases with that evidence, including that support from neighbors and from other people to help us with that. So what you're saying is absolutely spot on, and I appreciate you bringing it up. And that's the other thing with our neighborhood association. We have brought in a couple different organizations to talk on domestic violence and with women's shelters and places like that. And, that's why we're always strongly urging, begging people to come to the neighborhood meetings. Not, just because we want to bring what people need in Garden Hill. And if, you do have those women who are afraid to come out, who are afraid to go by themselves. Like I said, I came because I got robbed, having an officer at the meetings always helps. Nobody, they might not want to speak out, but they can go and talk to the officer after the meeting. And, I love any suggestion on how to get the word out to more people to come to the neighborhood meeting, because we meet third Monday every month without fail, and we will bring whoever is needed to help anyone who lives in Garden Hills with whatever problems that they might have.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I have a question. How would you protect someone that did want to come to you with information, say especially in the case of a serious, gun violence type crimes, people that do want to come to you with information but they may be afraid, how would you go about protecting that individual?
Yeah. All right, so Illinois law protects citizens who give information in a variety of different ways. The state's attorney can add anything that she wants to on this, but basically what happens is there are certain ways that we can take someone's information. Let's say I want to be anonymous. There are ways, legal ways, that we can use your information to go after the suspects who committed A, B, C, and D, and keep you anonymous, even if I knew your name. So under certain circumstances, Illinois law allows that. But if for some reason you have information that you want to give the police, but you're just too afraid, too nervous, citizens should count on Crime Stoppers.